Hi, Caleb with Brownells here, and in today's build we're going to be doing a BRN-4 that's a little bit different. So we're going to be doing a M27, but technically we're going to be doing an M38. And if you don't know what any of those are, you're like, what is this dude even talking about? Alright, so the M27 is basically a HK416 that is used as a kind of like a squad designated weapon kind of deal, so like a support fire type firearm. So they took the HK416, put a little bit longer barrel on it, depending on what length you started with, and beefed it up a little bit, and now you have like a squad support type weapon. And this is something that was kind of requested and adopted by the Marine Corps a while back. So what they did, they took this particular barrel type setup, that M27 profile barrel, which, like I said, is a little bit heavier, a little bit longer. They took an 11-inch quad rail, put those two on an HK416 upper receiver, and then boom, you had that designated infantry type rifle, right? And all they did was just slap like an ACOG or whatever on it, and then that was pretty much the setup. Now, there's an even cooler version of that gun. So these are all based on the 416, which means they're all based also on the Brownells BRN-4. Now the even cooler version of that is the M38. So the M38 took that exact setup, put a put a longer range optic on it, specifically a Leupold Mark 4 HD. So this right here is a Leupold Mark 4. It's not the same one they use, but it's close enough. I really like this one in particular, so we're gonna roll with this one. I'm not trying to do a one-for-one clone correct deal, and that'll become obvious whenever I get to the lower receiver. Okay, so we're going to be throwing this on there with the American Defense mount, and literally the only differences between the M27 and then that M38 is just the optic setup. Other than that, they're pretty much the same gun. They do both have bipods as well. We're not putting a bipod on right now. Maybe we'll throw that on in the future. And honestly, it's a Harris bipod, and we carry Harris bipods, but we carry so many other bipods, I had a hard time selecting which one to put on this particular build. And that's why you don't see one on the table right now. But whenever we get out and do some range stuff with it, I'll disclose which one I decided to go with at that point. Okay, so let's just kind of jump right into it and throw this thing together so you can actually see what I'm talking about instead of just me talking about it with a pile of parts and tools on the table. Alright, so of course we're using the Brownells vise, best gunsmith vise in the world, okay? And then for our upper receiver block, I'm going to be using the device Mark 1 Mod 0. Just use your favorite upper receiver vise block. This is my favorite upper receiver vise block. We'll drop our lower in. I mean, that's not a lower, that's an upper. And then we'll lock it in place. Alright, and what I did, I just took a Brownells BRN-4, stripped it, and now we're going to put new parts in it. Okay, so this one does have a spacer insert in it. I just noticed that. And this is just a spacer for different types of handguards. I don't know if we'll need that yet or not. We'll burn that bridge when we get there. Now we can just go ahead and start installing the barrel. And I'm just going to need some Brownells Action Lube Plus. I'm going to put that on the actual extension itself. And I know it looks like an AR-15 barrel, but that extension is way longer. They will not interchange. Alright, and then we'll just slide this into the upper. Alright, I'm going to grab a rag so I don't stain my Dixon flannel. Okay. And this is the barrel nut that originally came off. It's going on. This is an unfired gun too, and there's still a ton of that anti-seize on there. So I'm just going to leave that on there. I'm not going to add anything else to it. Alright, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. I'm going to rummage around for some more tools. We're going to need a torque wrench. Alright, we have our HK barrel nut tool, which this is a Brownells tool. It also works on some other handguards, like some of the Geisley ones. All right, and then we're just gonna do. Let's not measure in Newton meter. All right, let's go to. Let's just call it 65 foot-pounds. That'll be good. All right, there it is. There we go. Don't need that anymore. Okay, now we can install this gas block here. I'm actually going to do this on the table. Once I get it in place, all you got to do is take it, slide it on. You don't need to worry about alignment. There's an indexing tab on the top that locks into the barrel, so it goes in how it goes in. And then now we just need to take our 2 pins and drive them into that gas block, which the barrel's already cut for them. Grab a punch and hammer here. Let's see what size I want to use here. My New Year's resolution was to organize my punches. You see how that's going. That one's a little small. Is this am I playing jokes on myself? What's going on here? Alright, just kidding. Had to back up. Okay. This one is this is a Brownells 3/16 roll pin punch, and it is the perfect size for these HK gas block pins. Okay. Hammer. Hammer is also very important because it'd be really awkward without it. So I'm just gonna get them started just like that. Don't need to use a punch right out the gate. Unless you're really bad with a hammer, then I'd recommend doing it so you don't hit your gas block. And then we'll take our punch. And if they're going in really hard, don't just hammer the top of them because you'll flare them a little bit. Alright, now we just take our punch. And we're going to go in just below flush. This one went in a little too far. I'm just going to back it out just a little bit. There we go. Now they're just below flush on both sides, which is right where you want them. And I say flush, I mean flush from the top. They're sticking out a little bit on the bottom, which is that's exactly what you want them to look like. Alright, and then if you buy this M27 barrel from Brownells, you get this little guy as well. And this is an optional component, but we're going to put it on there because it's cool to have on there. Now what this is, if you look, notice there's these lugs on the bottom. I am 99.9% sure because I didn't look it up, but I think that's a bayonet lug. So we're just going to take that, install it in similar fashion. there's no indexing tab on this one, but whenever you get it, you know, close to the center, start your punch in, and when you start your punch in, it'll lock into that groove. Notice how I can't turn it that way anymore, or clockwise anymore. That's because it's in the correct position, and obviously as I drive it in, it won't rotate at all anymore. And this roll pin is smaller, so we're going to use a smaller punch. And there you have it. And because the hole is positioned towards the rear, and there's a shoulder right here, it'll only go on one way. You don't have to worry about accidentally putting it on backwards. If you accidentally put it on backwards, then you had to have used the drill, and then at that point it's no longer an accident. Alright. Now we'll go back to the barrel, not barrel. Man, words are hard today. This is an upper receiver vice block. Okay. Now the handguard. So we have two flavors, 9-inch, 11-inch. The 9-inch, even though as of the time of this video it's listed on our website as an M27 handguard, it technically has to be 11 inches to be considered such, but both are there if you just want a shorter quad rail. But if you want to do an M27 or M38, then you will need this longer version here. And also it comes like this, completely stripped, but it does include the screw and the retaining clip in there. So you have your screw right here and your retaining clip here. And the retaining clip simply just keeps the screw in place after it's like screwed out so it can't fall out and get lost. I'll show you that in just a second. So what we're going to do, or what you want to do first, is insert your screw. I'm going to call it the bolt. Insert your bolt into the end that is not threaded. That's the threaded end. The easiest way to tell is to look and see threads. Then tighten it down all the way until you can't turn it anymore. Just by hand though. Alright, so now you can take your retaining clip very carefully, and you were just going to insert it into the slot so that it sits inside like this, and then this just provides spring tension on the screw so that whenever you back it out, it can't easily fall out. And that's just to make things grunt proof. Like I said, this was a Marine contract rifle. I'm kidding, Marines are great. Alright, and then that's going to go in there. I'm going to actually back this out a bit just to get it out the way. And then what we'll have to do when we put it in is just basically make sure it can go into that slot right there, right? Alright, so what I'm going to do at this point, just to make things super easy, I've actually never had to change one of these out before. Alright, we're just going to go in all the way, use a tool to help you push it in. Just like so, and you'll feel it click into place, and you can see it in there now. And it's not going to fall out because it had to like spring into place. Now, if we're lucky, we can use the threads to push up on it and get underneath it. And then rather than forcing it past all the threads, I'm just going to use the threads to work for me. There you go. Alright, so now, when you take your gun apart, that screw cannot fall out unless you physically try to pull it out, right? And then it can lock into place forward. Okay, so, handguard install. Slide it on. Remember I mentioned that spacer before. We're going to see if we need it or not. Just slide the handguard key into the upper receiver slot. And there's a little bit of play there. So we're just going to take our spacer, drop it in the top, and push our handguard back on. I'll show you what that looks like here in just a second when I get it installed. I'm going to back off just a little bit. There we go. Okay. Now there's no play left and right. Perfect. Now we tighten our handguard. And make sure it's lining up here. There we go. I didn't have it seated all the way. And the base of this bolt right here has a bevel cut into it, and there's also a bevel cut into the handguard, so you get a ton of surface contact between the bolt and the handguard to help keep everything locked into place, which is just, you know, good design there. And what we'll want to do is just use a screwdriver to snug it up. All right. There we go. Now we can throw the optic on. And let's just kind of determine where we want it. Oh, I told you I would show you that slot, and the optic's going to cover it, so I should show you now. This area right here is what I was talking about. And you can see that spacer in there as well. And the spacer just takes out the left to right slot. Alright, so back to the optic. Leupold Mark 4 HD with an ADM mount. And eye relief on an AR type setup for me is going to be the optic pretty close to the back of the tank right there. That's where I want to be. So that's the slot I'm going to want it in. Now when I'm going to have to tighten these up a bit, I can feel. Alright, so we're locked into 6 on the rear. Just remember slot 6. And to tighten these bases, you put them in their loose position, push down, and then the bolt protrudes, you just turn that bolt. Alright, let's see how that feels. That ought to do pretty well. Alright, let me check the rear one or the front one, depending on how you look at it. I'll tighten that down once. Boom. Okay. So now when we put them in the slots, anytime you're dealing with any slotted mount type setup, when you put them in the slots, push forward on them to take out any slack that was in the back, because whenever you whenever you fire your firearm, the inertia of that optic on top is going to want to stay in place. So if you leave a gap there, that gap can be filled over time through recoil, which can also affect your zeros slightly and the integrity of your actual mount setup. So we're going to push forward, take out any slack, lock this base into place. Rhyme not intended, but sounded cool. And then we will continue mounting here. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to drop my scope in. I pulled this mount off of something else that already had an optic in it. I'm going to throw these screws and rings and all this stuff in real quick here. You're not going to be able to see what I'm doing because it's on my side, but I promise you're not missing out. Just making sure I don't do that upside down, because these bases can be upside down. Can be, but shouldn't be. Alright, this is the long and boring part of the process. Just kind of getting these screws close to flush. Once I get these close to tighten down, I'll give you a better idea of what we're doing here. And For those of you who may already be typing on your keyboard, yes, I am aware that this scope is currently very crooked. Alright, getting these tightened down. If I had a better singing voice, I would sing a song for y'all. But I don't. Also, if I had a better singing voice, I probably wouldn't be here building guns for your entertainment. I'd be singing for your entertainment. So you're welcome. Alright, now that we are getting somewhere. Alright, so on this particular optic here, the bottom of it, which is facing you now, is flat. It's perfectly flat. And the bottom of this base right here is also flat. So the best place to index your optic to make sure it's level to the firearm is on the bottom of it. So what I'd recommend doing at this point because we're going to be leveling the optic off of the base, we first need to make sure the base is level to the firearm. So I'm just going to drop a level on the back here, and it's not going to be level because it's in the vise. So I just need to make sure they're both off the same amount. And they are both off the same amount, which means the base, or the actual scope mount itself, is level to the firearm. So now, when I level this scope to the base, in theory, it'll also be level to the firearm. And to do that, on these types of setups, a really handy tool is this Arasaka level. So the base of it just kind of sits on the base of your mount, and then this angle slides in. And contacts, just barely, but it does, contacts the bottom of the scope and levels it to the actual mount, which is really nifty. So now everything's level. I don't have to do anything. It's mechanical and angles and whatnot. Also, I did just realize we didn't put the piston assembly underneath this handguard, so obviously we're gonna have to pull it back off and throw that piston in. But with that being said, I saw it sitting on the table and I was like, that goes inside of here somewhere. I knew I had extra parts. But no, in all seriousness, we'll do that last. Alright, so we'll just position this where we want it. We don't want our turret housing, our objective, or our eyepiece here to be touching the rings. So we want the rings to have a little bit of flat tube in between there, which they do. That's perfect. Then I will begin to lightly snug things up here. Perfect. Alright, and then I'm just making sure I didn't get this piece locked into, like, wedged in place, because that wouldn't have been good. Alright, so I'm going to keep it in as I continue here. What I'm doing, I'm pulling on it and then lifting it up and down a little bit to make sure there's no play, because that means the level change, but it didn't. It's nice and solid. Okay. Now, I just need to torque down these screws, and we're almost good to go at that point. And so I'm going to do that real quick. Whichever scope mount you're using, follow the instructions included with said mount, because they are mostly different. I was going to use the Fix-It Sticks torque piece, which is great. This Fix-It Sticks armor kit is one of my favorite kits in the world, but I'm going to use this Brownells torque driver. I use this one whenever I can. It is a lot bulkier of a tool. If I'm like going to the range, doing stuff out in the field, working on other people's stuff there, I just use the Fix-It Sticks. But when I have the option, I use the Brownells one here. Alright, and we're just going to torque these down real quick here. Like I said, just follow the torque settings of your optic base or mounts manufacturer. I'm just going to go in a star pattern here. All right. Now, as I mentioned before, we were missing something inside there. Something very important. If you want it to fire more than one round, which I think for us, that's the goal. Spacer fell out again, which is normal. You can, if you want, just glue these in place. Just a small amount of adhesive, like I don't want to say epoxy. If you're using an epoxy, make sure you use something really thin, but honestly, you don't really need it. Also, I don't like to do that because I often swap parts around a lot, so I don't like being stuck with one. Okay, what was I supposed to do? Piston. Okay, so we'll take this here. Piston just goes into that gas block. The piston rod goes in just like so. Boom. So easy, I could do it. Alright, now at this point, all you would need to do is install your preferred muzzle device. If you want to go with the standard, just use a standard like A2 style bird cage, that's perfectly fine. We're going to be suppressing this thing, so we're either going to go with Chemo or Xeno mount. I'm not sure which yet. We'll see how the wind blows on a particular day because I like both of those really well. Because this barrel is actually pretty long, I'm probably going to use the Dead Air Xeno mount because it is shorter than their Chemo mount. So, like I said, we'll do some range videos because I'm really curious to see how accurate we can get a BRN-4. And this setup right here with this barrel is probably at or close to its full potential. So we'll have to take this out to our 500 and stretch it out a little bit and see. I know some of you were saying, well, 500, I shoot 6 million meters and whatever. You're not shooting far enough. That's our longest bay on our range, so get off my back about it. Okay, so with all that being said, that is the M38. I'm not going to use the word clone. I'm going to use M38 style, right? Because it's M38 clone, handguard, and barrel, though. But there it is. So what we'll do, I don't have a bolt carrier group or charging handle in it at the moment, but I do have a lower receiver I can throw it on. So it will fit on any standard AR-15 lower. And the one I have it on right now is the one that was done in conjunction with Sons of Liberty Gunworks and Forward Controls design. One of my favorite lower receivers in existence. So what we'll do, I'll make up my mind. I'll figure out what bipod I want to put on here, and then I'll throw a muzzle device on there as well. Maybe some backup irons. I don't know. We'll see. Sky's the limit. But the cool thing about this, once I get all those things fleshed out, this will be available as a blueprint build on the Brownells website. So if you jump over to the website, this full build will be detailed out with every little piece and part I use, how to buy it, all that stuff. Obviously, there's not going to be any link on the YouTube video because we can't do that without the video getting taken down. So, with that being said, check it out on the website. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.